A warm welcome. You tuned in to Eye on Africa. I'm Rochelle Ferguson-Biahi with the top stories for you on the continent. Results trickle in Liberia 2 days after the country voted in presidential elections. Meanwhile, international observers have given the thumbs up, saying there were no major concerns. DR Congo's Electoral Commission says that long-awaited presidential elections won't take place until 2019, as there's still too much to organise. And Amnesty raises questions over the closed-door trials of Boko Haram suspects in Nigeria. Over 2,000 people are facing trial, but the press and public have been banned. We begin in Liberia, where results are trickling in 2 days after the country voted in presidential elections. If no one wins an outright majority, the two top candidates will advance to a runoff in November. International observers have given Tuesday's poll the thumbs up and have said there are no major concerns to report. Well, the vote is meant to bring Liberia's first democratic transfer of power in more than 7 decades. Our correspondent Leander Bassompierre is in Monrovia with the latest.
It has been 48 hours since polls closed here in Liberia, and people were very frustrated. We saw people taking to Twitter yesterday already, congratulating George Weah as being the president of the country. And you have that if the Electoral Commission takes a long time to start giving results in an election. So there was a lot of confusion in terms of who the president actually was, but the Electoral Commission was very clear that they were not going to release any results until 5 o'clock today. That media briefing was meant to take place at 1 o'clock. It only took place at 5 o'clock, and even further delays were then expected around that time as well. We were at the George Weah HQ, where lots of his supporters were waiting with their radios at their ears, radios out of their car boots, and they were very excited for the announcement. They were predicting a first-round victory for their presidential candidate, George Weah, and were even very confused as the Electoral Commission started announcing results, which was about 40 minutes after they had started. It was supposed to come at 5 o'clock. It was closer to 6 o'clock that they started. And it was a very laborious process. They went county by county by county. There were 15 counties, and it was very confusing. And as it stands at the moment, only 30% of the votes have been counted, and the results that they've given so far are based on that 30%. So what it stands at the moment is 43% for George Weah and around 25% for Vice President Joseph Boakai. A runoff, as you mentioned earlier, does look likely at this stage, but with 70% of the votes to still be counted, or to be tallied rather, one never knows.
In other news on the continent, DR Congo's Electoral Commission has said that long-awaited presidential polls won't take place until 2019, as there's still too much to organise. Well, polls were due this year under a transitional deal signed between the government and the opposition. The delay has raised concerns of further outbreaks of violence. France 24's Thomas Nicolan reports from Kinshasa.
The Congolese Electoral Commission has sparked fresh controversy, announcing that long-awaited presidential elections won't be held before 2019. The Commission's president says there's still too much to do, but that there could be an alternative solution.
There's not enough money, and insecurity is on the rise. We will need 504 days. Or politicians start listening to us and accept to use electronic voting machines, and then we can move forward faster.
But calls for an electronic vote will do little to appease the main opposition party. They say that since a deal reached in December 2016 was violated, the Electoral Commission had already lost its credibility.
To them, the political deal that was reached with the church doesn't mean anything. They still want to postpone the election until Kabila stays forever in power. To us, the announcement doesn't make any difference. We believe Kabila must step down by the end of the year, whether there's an election or not.
The government says it has no interest in postponing the election. Their spokesman, who claims the Electoral Commission is independent, says opposition leaders fear the poll because they're not prepared for it.
I just came back from a long tour at the heart of the country, and I never saw any sign of the opposition gathering troops. I only see them in Kinshasa's chancelleries or in Western capitals. So we are the ones who would rather have an election.
The complete electoral schedule should be released soon. The international community is ramping up the pressure on the Congolese government amid fears this endless political crisis might lead to more violence in DR Congo.
In a landmark ruling for campaigners, a South African court has found that an anti-apartheid activist who died in police custody 46 years ago did not commit suicide but was in fact murdered by police officers. 29-year-old Ahmed Timol was arrested in Johannesburg in October 1971. He died 5 days later. Police claimed he'd fallen from a window while in custody. That version of events was dismissed by the judge today. Have a listen.
Timol did not meet his death because he committed suicide. Timol died as a result of having been pushed to fall, an act which was committed by members of the security branch, amounting to murder.
Well, Ahmed Timol's case is by no means unique in South Africa, where the families of many activists who've died in police custody are still today seeking justice.
40 years ago, Philip Mabelane heard on the news of the death of a detainee at police headquarters in Johannesburg. Only later he discovered that the man was his 23-year-old son, Matthews. According to police at the time, Matthews had killed himself by jumping from the 10th-story window of this building, but his family never believed it. Now 95, Philip is still searching for the truth.
This is my son. Why is my son dead? Died. What for?
Between 1963 and 1990, 73 people died nationally in police detention. Many deaths occurred in questionable circumstances, with no officer ever held accountable. Families were often told their relatives fell or jumped from buildings or committed suicide in their cells. Lash Mabelane still remembers how his brother Matthews loved music and spending time with friends. He struggles to deal with his loss to this day.
Can you imagine how it feels when a person is pushed from the 10th floor? It's like it's a movie, but it's real.
Human rights organizations have accused the state of dragging its heels in dealing with these cases.
There are many victims and their families in our country who know part of the story and who also are able, because of the Truth Commission, to pinpoint who the perpetrators are. They deserve justice, and our country deserves justice.
The Mabelane family is happy to get the support of the Foundation for Human Rights, who has decided to also champion Matthew's case, but they worry that his elderly father, Philip, will run out of time to see justice being done.
Now, Nigeria is one of several African countries facing problems with a slumping economy. France 24 has been speaking to the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, who said help is at hand.
You know, for those countries, we are in strong partnership with them in order to implement a strategy. And that strategy is, for most of them, not so much Cameroon, because Cameroon is a bit more diversified than the other 5. But for the other 5 in particular, to move towards diversification of the economy, to be less oil dependent, because while the price of oil has gone up a little bit, it's not going to go back to the $100 per barrel that we saw a few years back. So they need to diversify the economy, they need to consolidate their public finance, and what we are trying to do is to help them along that way in order to secure a more stable and a more prosperous zone.
Amnesty International has expressed growing concern about the mass trials of Boko Haram suspects currently underway in Nigeria behind closed doors. Over 2,300 people are facing trials from which both the media and the public have been banned. Anna Cunningham and Moise Gomez report on the trials, which have raised questions over Nigeria's justice system.
These campaigners say they will never give up, gathering as they do daily in Nigeria's capital Abuja, calling for justice for Boko Haram victims. They welcome these trials, but also want transparency.
A good beginning that something like that is happening after about 4 years of what happened, especially for those of us that are actually from the Northeast region. But my but is, why is it in Kainji? Why can't it be in an open court?
There are more than 2,000 cases being heard by 4 judges. These are civilian trials in military facilities behind closed doors. Nigeria's legal system is being watched closely.
Nigeria is much more than ready for this type of trial because there is nothing spectacular in it. It's just a matter of following the law, particularly the anti-terrorism provisions, and make sure that the rights of the accused persons are not violated. It's like anybody committing any other crime.
Concerns have been raised by human rights groups such as Amnesty International. It has questioned the transparency of these secret trials, both for the accused and the victims.
Justice is not only being heard about, but it's something people see and people are able to interact with it. And even in terms of the carnage that has happened in these communities, it's important that those who experience it can actually come and face their accusers.
The Nigerian authorities have promised that every defendant will have legal representation, but there will continue to be no media access to the trials.
Well, you're up to date with all the stories on Eye on Africa. Up next, more international headlines. Stay tuned. You're watching France 24.
Revisited, presented by Stuart Norval.
Straddling the border between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, the Aral Sea has a surface area of 66,000 kilometers squared, twice the size of Belgium. In 1950, the Soviet Union diverted 2 rivers which fed the sea to irrigate their fields for large-scale cotton production. In 50 years, the Aral Sea lost 90% of its waters, leaving behind swathes of desert and ruining thousands of livelihoods. It seemed it was lost forever, but things have improved over 10 years thanks to a new dam. The water's rising gradually, with it the hopes of the inhabitants.
Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.